So since I already have some magic content on this channel, I thought it might be fun to show off one of my decks. The one right here is a passion project that I thought of a couple of years ago, or just 1 year, I can't remember, but I've been working on it for a couple of years. But the idea first started when I came into possession of 4 of these Nether Shadows. Nether Shadow is a really interesting creature where you really have to keep track of what's in your graveyard and what order, because if it's in the graveyard and it has like any combination of cards above it that includes 3 creatures, then it will reanimate itself on your next upkeep, I think. Yes. So on your upkeep, it'll reanimate itself if it has 3 creatures above it in the graveyard. So that gave me this idea for a deck that had creatures that just wouldn't go away. They would reanimate themselves. And I tried a few things, like I tried Ashen Ghoul and stuff like that. No, I tried Ashen Ghoul and I tried Gravecrawler. But ultimately I wanted stuff that would sort of reanimate all by themselves and completely for free. So the creatures I came up with were Nether Shadow, Bloodghast, and Prized Amalgam. And these guys all have triggers that don't really require you to tap any mana to get them to work. And then I tried a couple of shells around that, and I wound up with this. So this is a deck that I call Pox, or Pox Aggro, or Pox Midrange. I was talking with Adam, and I think we sort of decided that it was more of a mid-range deck, but it can play very aggro-y depending on what happens. So I figured I'd go through and I'd explain what the deck does. So just like I said before, we got Nether Shadow, Bloodghast, and Prized Amalgam, 4 of each, which gives us a pretty low creature count of 12. You don't really feel the low creature count in this deck because the deck can play 2 or 3 different ways, and ended up just like a really land-hatey deck. And the reason it ended up like that is because I needed an ability to get these guys in the graveyard as quickly as possible. So I ended up wanting to discard them from my hand if they were in my hand, or go get them directly from my deck and throw them into the graveyard, because they actually play more efficiently that way. So Nether Shadow, as I explained, will reanimate itself if it has 3 creatures above it in the graveyard. Other than that, it is a 2/2. Sorry, it's a 2 black mana. It's a 1/1. It has haste, so it's pretty fast, and you can put it out early and get it to block something and throw it into the graveyard, and it'll come out later on. Next up, we have Bloodghast, a pretty popular creature. It has a 2-drop 2/1 that can't block. It has haste as long as an opponent has 10 or less life, and it has a landfall effect that whenever a land enters the battlefield under my control, he'll reanimate. So he'll come back into play if I play a land. So next we have Prized Amalgam, which is a 3-drop 3/3 that I can't actually cast in this deck. This deck is technically mono black, because I can't generate any other colors. But it's a 3/3, so it's the biggest monster in the deck. And it says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield from my graveyard, or you cast it from your graveyard, return Prized Amalgam from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped at the beginning of your next end step. So, yeah, this he's pretty terrifying, especially if you get multiples of him in the graveyard, which is not as hard as it seems. I do it fairly often. Okay, so next up we have an obviously proxied Moxjet. Moxjet is just it's a freebie. It's basically a swamp that's an artifact. So you could drop this on the same turn as like a swamp or an Orborg or a wasteland. Next, we're running 4 Dark Ritual for some acceleration. There's some pretty fun shenanigans in this deck if I'm playing with like a group of friends. I can just immediately drop a Moxjet, I can Dark Ritual, I can Pox, and then drop a Swamp. It's nuts. But Dark Ritual is most people know what this is, but I'll explain it. It's a 1-drop instant that creates 3 black mana and adds it to your mana pool. Next, I'm running 3 Entombs. This is sort of a tutor for this deck. You can tap a black, it's an instant. You can search your library for a card and put it into your graveyard and then shuffle your library. So I'm normally going to be doing that to put like very specific things in the graveyard. Like if I know that I'm going to be discarding some prized amalgams, I'll actually entomb another shadow so that the nether shadow will reanimate itself, and once I get these guys in, so he'll reanimate himself and then reanimate the prized amalgams. And then they'll come out, and it'll be a fun day. We're running 2 Sinkhole, because a good portion of this deck is actually land hate and resource denial. And I figured, hey, why not lean into that a little bit? I've got extra space in the deck, and not much else that's going to help me work with these creatures. So we got Sinkhole. It's a 2-drop sorcery that destroys a target land. Next is my toolbox card. We've got Collective Brutality. This card is a major enabler for my discard and reanimate strategy. Running 3 of them. It's a 2-drop sorcery with Escalate. Discard a card. So if you want more, it's got 3 effects, and if you want more of these effects, you have to discard a card for every extra effects. So you can discard up to 2 cards, and you can get all 3 effects if you need to. But the effects are: target opponent reveals his or her hand, you choose an instant or sorcery card from it and they discard it, or target creature gets -2/-2, or target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So there's a little bit of recovery from a lot of the stuff that hurts us. We hurt ourselves a fair bit in this deck, and that's because of the next 8 cards I'm going to talk about. So the next 8 cards are Smallpox and then Pox. Smallpox, these 2 cards are pretty infamous. Smallpox is a 2-drop sorcery that says each player loses 1 life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature, and then sacrifices a land. That's pretty intense. This helps me a lot, actually, because it goes along with my land hate strategy, and it goes along with me wanting to put creatures into the graveyard so they can reanimate themselves later on. Pox is like the super extreme version of that, where instead of doing like one of those things, you do 1/3 of those things. It's 1 extra black mana, so it's 3 black, and it says each player loses 1/3 of his or her life, then chooses and discards 1/3 of the cards in their hand, then sacrifices 1/3 of the creatures they control, and finally sacrifices 1/3 of the land they control. Round each loss up. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this life loss. So yeah, that's really, really heavy, and it's such a interesting, unwieldy card that I had to build part of the deck around it, and it just happened to work out perfectly with what I was trying to do before. So to counteract a lot of this loss, we're running 3 Crucible of Worlds. That's a 3-drop artifact that says I can play lands from my graveyard, which is super cool because Bloodghast. So we have sort of an infinite loop going on there. Not really infinite, but you know what I'm saying. So in order to get some more stuff in the graveyard, we have 3 Buried Alive, which is just like Entomb, but it's a 3-drop and a sorcery, and we search for 3 creature cards. So normally what I'm going to do is if I have one of these and one of these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast Entomb, go get 1 Nether Shadow, and then when I can, cast Buried Alive and go get 3 Prized Amalgam and just throw them into the graveyard. And then instantly what happens, that next upkeep, Nether Shadow reanimates itself, and then in my end step, 3 Prized Amalgam come out, and we've got like 10 power on the field. Now obviously what I would want is I would want Nether Shadow to die first, so that if these guys start dying, they go in over Nether Shadow, and then the process reboots again. And then Bloodghast is this nice kind of in-between where if I'm playing lands, it'll reanimate itself, and then Prized Amalgam will reanimate, so I can sort of tool my graveyard the way I want it to be. So now land-wise, we've got 4 Wastelands. Wasteland just kind of leans into the land hate thing, but also allows me to sacrifice a land to replay with Crucible of Worlds to replay Bloodghast. So next we're running 4 Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. It says each land is a swamp in addition to other types, so then we can tap Wasteland for a black. So then we're running 13 basic swamps, and that's this is Pox Midrange. It's not terribly competitive, but it was a lot of fun to build. It's a ton of fun to play, especially against one of Adam's decks, which hopefully he'll be able to show that on the channel as well. What you'll notice about a lot of my decks is I play black most of the time. It has most of my favorite effects in it, and so yeah, most of them that you see from me are going to be black. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully I'll be able to show you some games with it. It's a really fun deck. Thanks for watching.